Imagine walking into a dealership, cash in hand, ready to buy the motorcycle of your dreams, only to find out it's not available in the US. No matter how much you want it, no matter how much you're willing to pay, you simply can't get it. That's right, there are some incredible motorcycles out there that are forbidden fruit for American riders. But why? In today's video, we're diving into the exotic motorcycles you can't buy in the US, the ridiculous regulations keeping them out, and the insane challenges of trying to import one. Have you ever wondered why some of the world's most incredible machines never make it to American soil? Stick around, because we're about to uncover the truth behind the bikes the US government doesn't want you to own. First up, let's talk about the motorcycles that are simply too exclusive, too expensive, or too niche for the US market. Number 1. Honda NR750. One of the most bizarre yet brilliant motorcycles Honda ever built, the NR750. This ultra-rare superbike was introduced in the early 90s, featuring a revolutionary V4 engine with oval pistons, allowing it to perform like a V8 in a compact package. It was light years ahead of its time, packed with titanium, carbon fiber, and race-inspired engineering, making it one of the most expensive motorcycles ever built by Honda. So why can't you buy one? It was never officially sold in the US, and with only a few hundred ever made, even if you could import one, you'll need a fortune just to find one for sale. Number 2. Yamaha R6 GYTR. Remember the legendary Yamaha R6? Well, after Yamaha discontinued the street-legal version, they released a track-only variant called the R6 GYTR, a full-bore race machine stripped of street equipment and packed with high-performance goodies. This means no headlights, mirrors, or emissions compliance, making it impossible to legally register for street use in the US. If you want an R6 today, your only option is to buy a used one, because Yamaha won't sell you this race-spec beast for the road. 3. Kawasaki ZX-25R. What if I told you a 250cc sports bike could rev higher than a MotoGP bike? Meet the Kawasaki ZX-25R, a quarter-liter pocket rocket featuring an inline-4 engine that revs to 17,000 RPM. It's a throwback to the glory days of high-revving 250cc sport bikes, and it's available in Japan, Indonesia, and other Asian markets, but not in the US. Why? Emission regulations and lack of demand for small displacement 4-cylinder bikes. Here, people want bigger engines, so Kawasaki never bothered to bring it stateside. And these are just a few examples. There are countless dream machines that never make it to the US, and the biggest reason? Regulations. So why are many motorcycles banned from the US market? It all comes down to emissions, safety standards, and bureaucracy. Number 1. Emission regulations. At the top of the list of reasons why motorcycles never make it to the US is emission regulations. Unlike safety standards, which at least attempt to protect riders, emission laws are purely bureaucratic, and they kill more motorcycle models than any other regulation. The biggest offender? California's CARB, or California Air Resistance Resource Board, emission laws. While these regulations technically apply only to California, they often become the de facto standard for the entire country. Manufacturers don't want to create two separate versions of the same motorcycle, one for California and another for the rest of the US. So they either comply with CARB regulations or skip the US market altogether. For a motorcycle to be sold in America, it has to meet both EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and CARB emission standards. If a bike fails to meet these strict pollution rules, manufacturers have two options. 1. Redesign the bike's engine, exhaust, and emission system, a process that can cost millions of dollars and take years to develop, or 2. Give up on selling the bike in the US altogether. Why do these regulations kill so many bikes? Many high-performance and small production motorcycles run into issues with California's ultra-strict emissions requirements. If a motorcycle uses a unique engine configuration, aggressive tuning, or an older style fuel system, it often won't pass US emission tests without expensive modifications. This affects everything from two-stroke engines to high-revving sports bikes and exotic European models. For example, Kawasaki ZX-25R, a screaming 17,000 RPM inline-4 sports bike, is banned in the US because its high-revving engine struggles to pass emission tests. Two-stroke motorcycles are nearly extinct in the US due to emission regulations, while they remain popular in other countries. Many exotic European motorcycles, like the Bimota Tessie H2 and the Aprilia RS660 Trofeo never made it to the US because manufacturers don't want to spend money modifying them to meet emission rules. How emission laws are killing innovation. The worst part? Emission regulations often stifle innovation rather than encourage it. Instead of allowing manufacturers to experiment with new, cleaner, and more efficient engine technologies, these laws force them into expensive redesigns or push them out of the market altogether. If a motorcycle manufacturer is already making low production numbers, redesigning the engine just for the US market is often too costly to justify. The result? We miss out on some of the most exciting and unique motorcycles available worldwide. With electric motorcycles gaining traction, emission laws may soon become less relevant. But for now, they remain one of the biggest roadblocks preventing riders from accessing the world's best bikes. And until the US government rethinks its approach to emission rules, American riders will continue to be locked out of some of the most exciting motorcycles on the planet. Number 2. Safety standards. Even if a motorcycle passes emission tests, it still has to jump through another set of regulatory hoops before it can be legally sold in the US. The Department of Transportation and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration enforce some of the strictest safety requirements in the world, and while some of these regulations make sense, others are completely outdated and unnecessary. What exactly does a motorcycle need to pass the US safety standards? Headlights, turn signals, and reflectors. The US requires specific headlight positioning, brightness levels, and turn signal placement, meaning bikes with unique designs or integrated lighting systems, like many European models, don't qualify. Brake systems and ABS requirements. Some bikes are banned simply because they lack ABS, even though ABS isn't required in all markets. In other cases, manufacturers are forced to redesign their braking system to comply with different US standards, which adds to cost and complexity. Frame strength and impact testing. Even though motorcycles are inherently dangerous compared to cars, the US still requires extensive frame strength testing. If a bike's frame doesn't meet exact US testing criteria, it's banned, even if it has passed rigorous safety tests in Europe, Japan, or Australia. The problem? These rules don't always align with global standards, meaning motorcycles that are perfectly legal and widely used in other countries are instantly disqualified from US roads, instead of allowing more variety, innovation, and consumer choice. These rigid regulations restrict what motorcycles Americans can buy, often for reasons that have nothing to do with real-world safety. Many manufacturers simply don't want to spend money to make a separate, US-specific version of a motorcycle, especially if the bike is a low-volume model. As a result, they skip the US market entirely, leaving American riders without access to some of the world's best motorcycles. The bottom line? The US motorcycle market is being held back by outdated and unnecessary safety standards, preventing riders from enjoying unique, innovative, and high-performance bikes that are perfectly safe everywhere else in the world. And number 3. The 25-year rule. For motorcycle enthusiasts, one of the most frustrating and outdated laws in the US is the 25-year import rule. This regulation, enforced by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency, prohibits the importation of non-compliant motorcycles unless they are at least 25 years old. What does this mean in practice? If a motorcycle was never officially sold in the US, no matter how safe, well-engineered, or sought after it is, you legally cannot import it until it hits a quarter of a century in age. This means that some of the most desirable motorcycles in the world remain completely off limits to American riders for decades. This law was originally designed to protect American consumers from vehicles that didn't meet US safety and emission standards, but in reality, it has blocked countless legendary motorcycles from ever reaching American roads, even when they are perfectly legal and widely used in other countries. For collectors and enthusiasts, the waiting game is agonizing. Every year, a handful of motorcycles finally pass the 25-year mark, allowing them to be legally imported under classic or antique vehicle exemptions. But for modern motorcycles that push the boundaries of technology and design, this law completely shuts out American riders, forcing them to either wait for decades or attempt to navigate the near impossible process of legal modifications and compliance testing. The 25-year rule has effectively turned some of the best motorcycles in the world into forbidden treasures, leaving American riders stuck with limited options while the rest of the world enjoys bikes that we can only dream of. The import challenge. Why it's a nightmare to bring these bikes in. So what if you really want one of these forbidden motorcycles? Can you just import it yourself? Well, yes, but it's an expensive, complicated, and frustrating process. 1. The paperwork nightmare. Importing a non-US motorcycle means dealing with customs paperwork and import duties, EPA and DOT compliance documents, title and registration issues at the state level. And unless the bike meets every single US regulation, you'll have a hard time getting it registered for street use. 2. Modifications and compliant cost. Even if you manage to import the bike, you may need to modify it to make it legal. That means installing DOT-approved lights and mirrors, tuning the engine to meet emission standards, and paying thousands of dollars for inspections and certifications. For most riders, it's simply not worth the hassle, which is why so many amazing bikes never make it to the American roads. Will the US ever change? So why can't you buy some of the coolest motorcycles in the world in the US? It all comes down to strict regulations, high costs, and manufacturer decisions. But there's a glimmer of hope. As more riders demand access to global motorcycles, some manufacturers are starting to fight back. Brands like Royal Enfield, KTM, and Triumph are bringing more of their global models to the US, and there's hope that laws could change in the future. But until then, American riders will have to wait, import, or just dream about these forbidden motorcycles. Now, I want to hear from you. Which motorcycle do you wish was sold in the US? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more motorcycle content.